What happens when a woman, underestimated and humiliated, walks into a courtroom filled with corruption? When the truth is revealed and the hunters become the hunted, a simple trial turns into a national scandal. Lies unravel, power crumbles, and one woman changes the system forever. If you love stories of justice, power, and shocking plot twists, hit that like button, comment your country, and subscribe for more. The grand courtroom of the New York Supreme Court was filled with a familiar crowd: lawyers, officials, and police officers, all moving with confidence and power. At the door, a woman stood still. She was black, dressed in a simple navy blue blazer and slacks, her hair pulled into a neat bun. As she stepped forward, a white police officer blocked her path. "Court's not open to civilians today. Step aside," he said, his tone condescending. The woman reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded letter. "I have a hearing today." The officer snatched it from her hands, ripped it in half, and let the pieces fall to the ground. "Not anymore, you don't." A young female attorney, passing by, let out a mocking chuckle. "You actually thought you'd win? You're defending yourself. You're doomed." The woman said nothing. She simply stepped past them and entered the courtroom. The whispers started immediately. "Who is she? Is she lost? She's going to embarrass herself." At the front of the room, Judge Alan Whitaker, a seasoned white judge with a reputation for quick dismissals, sat down with an arrogant smirk. He looked the woman up and down, then laughed out loud. "Miss, I believe you're in the wrong courtroom. This is the Supreme Court." A few people in the audience laughed along with him. The woman's face remained unreadable. Then, she reached into her bag and placed a USB drive on the table. "I suggest we start the trial." The room fell silent. Judge Whitaker frowned. For the first time, he looked uneasy. And that's when the real game began. The courtroom sat in an uneasy silence, all eyes locked on the small USB drive resting on the table. Judge Alan Whitaker's smirk faded, replaced by a thinly veiled scowl. "Miss, whoever you are," he said, tapping his gavel, "this is a courtroom, not a tech convention. If you think dropping a USB on my desk will earn you sympathy, you're sorely mistaken." The woman didn't react. She simply plugged the USB into the courtroom's display system. The large screen behind the judge flickered. Then, a video began to play. A video no one expected. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed a late-night meeting in a dimly lit parking garage. A man in a police uniform was seen exchanging a thick envelope of cash with another man in a dark suit. The courtroom held its breath. Then, the camera angle shifted, revealing the faces of the two men. One of them was Officer Daniel Brooks, the very same officer who had ripped up the woman's letter at the courthouse entrance. The other? Judge Alan Whitaker himself. The entire courtroom exploded in gasps. Whitaker's face turned ghost white. This is ridiculous," he sputtered. But the video wasn't done. More footage appeared, this time showing a list of case dismissals signed by Whitaker. Among them, drug lords, human traffickers, corrupt officials. Every single one of them had paid to walk free. The fall begins. The prosecuting attorney, Richard Moore, stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling, "what exactly is this?" Whitaker slammed his gavel down violently. "Enough," he bellowed. "This is an illegal recording. It is not admissible in court." The woman finally spoke. "Actually, Judge," she said calmly, "this was obtained through an FBI surveillance operation. Every clip here is authenticated and legally admissible." She turned to face the now silent audience. "Would you like to see the FBI warrant that authorized it?" Whitaker froze. Officer Brooks, still standing near the entrance, slowly backed toward the door. But before he could move, the doors slammed open. The storm arrives. A team of FBI agents, dressed in black tactical gear, stormed in, guns drawn. The lead agent held up a federal arrest warrant. "Judge Alan Whitaker," he announced, his voice cold and authoritative, "you are under arrest for corruption, bribery, and obstruction of justice." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Whitaker shot up from his seat, his face now red with fury. "You can't do this," he roared. "I am a Supreme Court judge." The lead FBI agent didn't blink. "And now you're a suspect." Two agents grabbed Whitaker, yanking his arms behind his back as they snapped handcuffs onto his wrists. The judge thrashed wildly, his entire world crashing down. "I demand a lawyer. I demand." But his voice was drowned out by the murmurs, the whispers, the shocked expressions of everyone in the room. The powerful Judge Alan Whitaker, a man who had ruined countless lives, was now just another criminal in cuffs. The betrayal. Officer Brooks, still frozen near the door, took a step back. Then another. Then he bolted. Or at least, he tried. But before he could reach the exit, a gun clicked behind his head. Vanessa King, the FBI's top undercover agent, smirked as she pressed her weapon against his skull. "Going somewhere, officer?" she whispered. Brooks slowly raised his hands, his breathing shaky. I didn't know," he stammered. "I was just following orders." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Yeah, that excuse doesn't work anymore." With one swift movement, she snapped cuffs onto his wrists and shoved him forward. The unmasking. As Whitaker and Brooks were dragged out, the courtroom was left in stunned silence. The woman, still standing tall, turned back toward the judge's bench. She reached into her blazer pocket, pulling out a second badge. Then, she set it on the table for everyone to see. The golden letters gleamed under the fluorescent light. United States Secret Service. The whispers turned into shouts of disbelief. She's USSS. A Secret Service agent. Even Richard Moore, the prosecutor, stumbled back in shock. The woman looked around the room, her expression unreadable. "You all thought I was here to defend myself," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, yet sharp as a blade. "But I never needed a lawyer." She stepped forward, glancing toward the empty judge's seat. "I came to clean house." The trial was over. But the real fight had just begun. The courtroom was still in chaos. The once powerful Judge Alan Whitaker had been dragged away in handcuffs. Officer Daniel Brooks, the corrupt cop, had been caught trying to escape. And now, all eyes were on her. The woman in the navy blue blazer. The woman who had just shattered the system with a single move. The name that shook the court. "Who are you?" Prosecutor Richard Moore finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman looked at him, her gaze steady. Then, she reached into her pocket, pulled out her ID, and held it up for everyone to see. "Special Agent Naomi Cole, United States Secret Service." The room gasped. "Secret Service?" someone muttered. "What the hell is the Secret Service doing here?" Another voice whispered. Even Moore looked shaken. "You're not a defendant." Naomi's lips curled into a smirk. "No, I'm not." She turned her gaze toward the remaining court officials, judges, clerks, attorneys, all of whom now looked terrified. "I wasn't here to stand trial. I was here to expose one. The hidden enemy." Before Moore could say another word, Naomi reached into her bag and placed a thick folder on the prosecution's desk. "Take a look." Moore hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, he flipped it open. His face drained of color. Inside were dozens of pages. Bank statements, case records, signed verdicts. Every single document tied corrupt judges and prosecutors to an underground network of criminals. And the worst part? It went beyond Whitaker. Judge Whitaker had been just a pawn. Someone bigger was pulling the strings. Moore swallowed hard. "Where did you get this?" Naomi tilted her head. "Let's just say," she said slowly, "you all should have been more careful with your emails." Moore flipped to the last page, and his heart stopped. There, written in bold black ink, was a name he never expected. Chief Justice Harold Sinclair, the head of the state's highest court, the man who controlled every ruling, every appeal, every major decision. Moore staggered back. This is impossible." Naomi leaned in. "It's very possible. And I have more." She reached for the remote, pressed a button, and the courtroom screen flickered again. A new video began playing. The meeting in the shadows. The footage was clearer than before. A private meeting room. A group of high-ranking judges and officials sat around a long, polished table. At the head, Chief Justice Harold Sinclair himself. "We control the outcomes," Sinclair's voice said, his tone calm but chilling. "We decide who walks and who doesn't. We answer to no one." He leaned forward, placing a thick envelope of cash onto the table. "As long as we keep the machine running, we are untouchable." The room in the video laughed. The room in real life sat frozen. Moore's hands were shaking now. This is a national scandal." Naomi crossed her arms. "Now you understand why I'm here." The threat within. Before Moore could respond, his phone buzzed violently. A news alert. He glanced at the screen, then his breath caught in his throat. "Oh my God." He slowly turned the phone around for Naomi to see. A headline flashed across the screen. Chief Justice Harold Sinclair releases statement. Calls recent arrests a witch hunt. Naomi's eyes narrowed. He knows. More swallowed. He's trying to get ahead of this. Naomi was already moving. She grabbed the folder off the desk, snapped it shut, and turned toward Vanessa King, the undercover FBI agent still standing guard. We need to move. Now. Vanessa nodded. Where to? Naomi glanced at the screen one last time. Then, she smiled coldly. We're paying Chief Justice Sinclair a visit. The calm before the storm. As Naomi and Vanessa headed toward the exit, Moore called after them. Wait. They stopped. Moore took a deep breath. If what you're saying is true. He hesitated. Then we might not make it out of this alive. Naomi grinned. Oh, we're definitely not making it out unscathed. She turned toward the exit. But that's what makes it fun. And with that, they disappeared into the night. The fight was far from over. It was just beginning. The black SUV sped through the dark streets of Washington, D.C., weaving through traffic with deadly precision. Inside, Naomi Cole sat in the back, her expression cold, unreadable. Beside her, Vanessa King reloaded her gun, checking the chamber with an almost casual confidence. In the passenger seat, Marcus Boyd, their intelligence specialist, scrolled through encrypted files on his tablet. You sure about this? He muttered, glancing at Naomi. Naomi didn't blink. Chief Justice Sinclair is making his move. If we don't hit first, we lose. Marcus sighed. That's what I was afraid of. He turned the tablet toward her. A live security feed of Sinclair's mansion. High walls. Private security. State-of-the-art surveillance. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress. Vanessa smirked. I love a challenge. Naomi allowed herself a small smile. Then let's knock on his door. The fortress of power. They arrived at Sinclair's estate. A massive, secluded mansion on the outskirts of D.C. A long driveway, lined with armed guards, led to the front entrance. Naomi studied them through binoculars. He's expecting trouble. Vanessa grinned, adjusting her earpiece. Good. That means he's nervous. Marcus typed rapidly on his tablet, hacking into the estate's security system. I can shut down the cameras for 60 seconds. After that, we're on our own. Naomi's eyes hardened. That's all we need. She turned to Vanessa. You take the west entrance. Marcus and I will go through the back. Vanessa nodded, pulling her gun. Let's crash this party. The silent takedown. The moment the cameras went dark, they moved. Naomi and Marcus slipped through the back gate, taking out 2 guards silently. Vanessa scaled the west wall, landing like a shadow before knocking out another guard with a single strike. The timing was perfect. They reached the back door just as the cameras came back online. Marcus hacked the electronic lock. The door clicked open. Naomi exhaled. They were in. The meeting. They moved through the dimly lit hallways, avoiding patrolling guards. Finally, they reached the study. Inside, Chief Justice Harold Sinclair sat at his desk, sipping whiskey. He didn't look surprised. He smirked. I was wondering when you'd show up. Naomi stepped forward, gun drawn. Then you should know why I'm here. Sinclair chuckled, setting down his glass. Oh, Agent Cole. You're ambitious. But you're not the first to try this. Naomi's grip tightened. And yet, I'm still standing. Sinclair's eyes gleamed. For now. Then, the room filled with armed men. Guards stepped out of the shadows, weapons aimed. Vanessa cursed under her breath. Marcus froze. Sinclair leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. You didn't think I'd be unprepared, did you? Naomi's jaw clenched. She had walked straight into a trap. The offer. Sinclair gestured lazily, and one of his men snatched Naomi's gun. She let him, for now. Sinclair smiled. You and I both know how this works, he said. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Naomi glanced at it, but didn't touch it. What is this? She asked. A deal. Sinclair's voice was smooth, confident. I have connections, Agent Cole. You can either walk away and live, or push this further and disappear like the rest. He folded his hands. You're smart. You know how this game is played. Naomi stared at him. Then she laughed. Sinclair's smirk faltered. Naomi leaned in, her voice ice cold. You think I came here alone? Sinclair narrowed his eyes. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. Naomi tilted her head. Something wrong. Sinclair slowly set the phone down, his hands shaking. Because on the screen was a live news broadcast, and in front of every camera in the country. FBI Director Thomas Carter was giving a press conference. We have uncovered evidence linking Chief Justice Harold Sinclair to widespread judicial corruption and criminal activity. A full federal investigation is underway. Sinclair stared at the screen, horror dawning on his face. Naomi smirked. Did you really think I wouldn't have a backup plan? The guards shifted nervously, unsure what to do. Sinclair grabbed his whiskey glass, downing the drink in one gulp. You have no idea what you've just done, he whispered. Naomi's expression turned hard. Oh, I do. She stood up, looking around at his armed men. So what's it going to be? She asked. You shoot us, and the FBI knows exactly where we are. Or you surrender, and we do this the legal way. Sinclair's fingers curled into fists. Then, the front doors burst open. FBI agents swarmed the mansion. Sinclair's guards dropped their weapons immediately. Sinclair? He just sat there, staring at the screen. His empire was falling apart. Naomi leaned in, whispering her final words. Checkmate. The beginning of the end. As Sinclair was dragged out in handcuffs, Naomi stepped outside, breathing in the cool night air. Vanessa grinned. You really love pissing off powerful men, don't you? Naomi smirked. It's my favorite hobby. Marcus chuckled. What now? Naomi's eyes darkened. Now, she said, we find out who Sinclair was really working for. Because she knew. This wasn't the top. Someone bigger was pulling the strings. And Naomi was going to find them. The air was thick with tension as Naomi Cole sat in the back of a black FBI transport vehicle, watching the city lights blur past. Sinclair had fallen. The Chief Justice, once thought untouchable, had been dragged out in cuffs, his name now plastered across every major news network. But Naomi wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because if Sinclair was this easy to take down, then he was never the real threat. He was just another pawn. And Naomi was after the king. The warning. Vanessa King leaned against the seat beside her, checking her gun like it was just another night at the office. So what now? She asked. Naomi stared ahead, her mind already racing ahead. Now we find out who Sinclair was protecting. Vanessa smirked. You're fun at parties, aren't you? Before Naomi could respond, Marcus Boyd, her tech specialist, turned from his laptop in the front seat. Guys, we have a problem. Naomi frowned. Define problem. Marcus rotated the screen toward them. A breaking news headline flashed across the feed. Sinclair's arrest sparks political outrage. Senator William Hawthorne calls it a deep state coup. Naomi's blood ran cold. Hawthorne, the senator who had once shielded corrupt judges, prosecutors, and police officers from the law. The man who had stood behind Whitaker. Behind Sinclair. And now, he was spinning the narrative. He's trying to control the damage, Vanessa muttered. Marcus scrolled further. More than that, he said, his voice tightening. He's rallying support. He turned to Naomi. You took down Sinclair in a courtroom. Hawthorne is going to make sure you never see the inside of one. Naomi's jaw clenched. Let him try. The setup. They arrived at the FBI field office, where Director Thomas Carter was already waiting for them. The grizzled director had seen every kind of corruption imaginable, but even he looked tense. Senator Hawthorne just requested an emergency hearing with the Supreme Court, Carter said the moment Naomi stepped inside. He's claiming Sinclair's arrest was unconstitutional. Naomi let out a sharp breath. He's trying to shut this down before we get to him. Carter nodded. And it's working. He tossed a manila folder onto the table. Inside was a list of federal judges, all of them set to review Sinclair's case. Naomi scanned the names, then stopped at one. Her stomach twisted, because at the very top was Justice Ethan Caldwell, a known political ally of Hawthorne, a man who had overturned corruption cases before. And now, he was about to do it again. Naomi snapped the folder shut. Hawthorne isn't just trying to stop this. She met Carter's gaze. He's trying to erase it. The informant. Before Naomi could say another word, Marcus's laptop pinged. A new email. The subject line? I have information, but we need to meet. Alone. Naomi frowned. Who sent this? Marcus typed furiously, tracing the IP address. Then, his eyes widened. It's coming from inside the Capitol. Vanessa whistled. We have a rat in the nest. Naomi grabbed her coat. Then let's go meet them. Carter's voice hardened. Cole, this could be a setup. Naomi nodded. That's why I'm taking Vanessa. Vanessa grinned. I love being bait. Marcus sighed. Why am I even here? Naomi smirked. Because you're going to hack the security feeds while we go in. Marcus grumbled, but pulled out his laptop. Fine. But if you die, I'm not writing your obituary. Naomi and Vanessa headed out. They had a meeting to crash. The informant's truth. They arrived at a parking garage near Capitol Hill, the location from the email. A lone figure stood in the shadows, wearing a hooded coat, face hidden. Naomi and Vanessa approached cautiously. You have 60 seconds, Naomi said. The figure hesitated. Then, a male voice spoke. You don't understand how deep this goes. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Then explain it. The man pulled out a flash drive and handed it to Naomi. This is everything. Emails, recordings, bank transfers. Naomi pocketed it. Who's behind it all? The man looked around nervously. Hawthorne isn't the top, he whispered. There's someone else. Naomi's heart pounded. Who? The man opened his mouth to answer. Bang! A single gunshot echoed through the garage. The man stiffened. Then he collapsed. Naomi dove for cover, drawing her gun. Vanessa spun around, aiming toward the direction of the shot. Silence. Then, a figure appeared on the rooftop, holding a sniper rifle. Naomi's blood ran cold. She recognized the stance. The way he moved. Oh hell, Vanessa whispered. Because standing on that rooftop, staring directly at them, was Adrian Cross, Hawthorne's personal enforcer. A ghost. A professional assassin. And now, he had Naomi in his sights. The escape. Bang. Another shot ripped through the air, barely missing Naomi as she dove behind a pillar. Vanessa fired back, but Cross was already moving. Naomi grabbed the flash drive from the fallen informant and bolted for the car. Vanessa jumped into the driver's seat and floored the gas. More gunfire followed them as they sped out of the garage. Naomi clutched the flash drive. Inside was everything. And now, she knew two things. One, Hawthorne wasn't at the top. And two, whoever was, they just sent a hitman to clean up the mess. Naomi gritted her teeth. Now it's personal. The black SUV tore through the streets of Washington, D.C., weaving between cars as gunfire ripped through the air behind it. Vanessa King gripped the wheel tightly, her face calm but focused. That sniper's not letting up, she shouted, taking a hard right. Naomi Cole sat in the passenger seat, her gun drawn, eyes locked on the side mirror. From the rooftop behind them, Adrian Cross reloaded his rifle with an almost leisurely precision. Then he jumped. Vanessa's eyes widened. Tell me he didn't just do what I think he did. Naomi's jaw clenched. He did, because Adrian Cross, Hawthorne's personal assassin, had just leapt off the rooftop onto a speeding motorcycle. And now, he was chasing them down. The hunter and the prey. Naomi turned to Marcus Boyd, who was frantically typing on his laptop in the back seat. Tell me you have something, Marcus. Working on it. Marcus snapped. He was hacking into traffic cameras, trying to get a clear view of Cross's movements. Give me 20 seconds. We don't have 20 seconds. Vanessa shouted. Because now, Cross was gaining on them. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a silenced pistol. Naomi barely had time to react before. Bang! A bullet ripped through the back window, missing Marcus by inches. Jesus! Marcus yelped, ducking. Tell me again why we're doing this. Naomi whipped around, aimed her gun through the shattered rear window, and fired back. Cross swerved, dodging effortlessly. Then he accelerated. Vanessa, take the freeway. Naomi ordered. That's suicide. Do it. Vanessa cursed, but obeyed, yanking the wheel and barreling onto the highway. Naomi reloaded her gun, watching as Cross followed without hesitation. He's not stopping, Marcus said, shaking his head. Naomi's eyes darkened. Then neither are we. The trap. Miles ahead, an 18-wheeler truck was switching lanes. Naomi's mind raced. Then, an idea hit her. Vanessa, when I say now, slam the brakes. Vanessa's brows furrowed. You do realize we're on a freeway, right? Just trust me. Naomi watched Cross in the mirror. Closer. Closer. Now, she shouted. Vanessa slammed the brakes. The SUV skidded violently, tires screeching. And Cross. He was going too fast to stop. Naomi fired a single shot. It hit the front tire of his motorcycle. The bike spun out of control. And before Cross could react, he slammed directly into the side of the 18-wheeler. The impact sent him flying. Naomi watched as Cross rolled across the pavement, tumbling into a ditch. The motorcycle was totaled. The highway erupted into chaos. Cars swerved, honking furiously. But Naomi wasn't watching them. She was watching the ditch. Waiting, holding her breath. Then, a shadow moved, and Adrian Cross stood up. A warning from the devil. Naomi gritted her teeth. Vanessa's eyes widened. How the hell is he still standing? Cross was bleeding, his suit torn, his lips split open. But he didn't stumble. He didn't look hurt. He simply dusted off his jacket, adjusted his cufflinks, and smirked. Then, he raised his hand. Not with a gun, but with a single finger, pointing directly at Naomi. Then, slowly, he dragged that finger across his throat. A silent promise. A warning. This isn't over. Naomi's grip tightened on her gun. She could shoot him now. Take him out. End this. But something stopped her. Something felt wrong. Let's go, she muttered. Vanessa didn't argue. She floored the gas, and the SUV sped away. Naomi didn't look back, because she already knew. Adrian Cross would come for her again. The files that change everything. Back at the safe house, Marcus plugged in the flash drive they had recovered from the informant. Naomi, Vanessa, and Carter gathered around the screen. The files loaded, and what they saw made their blood run cold. A list of names, high-ranking officials, judges, CEOs, and at the very top, Senator William Hawthorne. Naomi wasn't surprised, but it was the second name that made her stomach drop. Vanessa whispered it out loud. Director Thomas Carter. The room fell into dead silence. Because Carter, their boss, the man they trusted, was on the list. And that meant the FBI's highest-ranking official was working with the enemy. Carter's face was unreadable. Naomi slowly turned toward him. Say something. Carter exhaled. Then, he reached for his gun. Naomi's heart pounded. Vanessa instantly grabbed her weapon. Marcus froze. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, Carter spoke. You have no idea what you've just done. And suddenly, Naomi realized she might not make it out of this alive. The air in the safe house turned to ice. Naomi Cole stared down the barrel of her boss's gun. FBI Director Thomas Carter stood motionless, his expression unreadable, his weapon pointed directly at her. Beside her, Vanessa King had already drawn her pistol, her grip tight, her aim steady. Marcus Boyd, still sitting by the laptop, looked between them, his hands frozen over the keyboard. Tell me this is a mistake, Naomi said, her voice low, controlled. Carter exhaled, his finger resting just outside the trigger guard. I warned you, he said. You had no idea what you were walking into. Naomi's pulse pounded. Then tell me what I just walked into. Carter's jaw clenched. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, he lowered the gun. Vanessa kept her aim. Try anything, and I put you down, she warned. Carter ignored her. Instead, he walked to the table, grabbed a whiskey glass, and poured himself a drink. He downed it in one gulp. Then, he finally looked at Naomi. You're chasing shadows, Cole. Naomi folded her arms. That's so? Because last time I checked, your name was on a list full of corrupt officials. Carter scoffed. You think this is about corruption? He muttered. Enlighten me. Naomi shot back. Carter studied her for a long moment. Then, he reached into his jacket pocket. Vanessa tensed, finger on the trigger. But instead of a gun, Carter pulled out a folded document. He tossed it onto the table. Read it. Naomi picked it up and unfolded it carefully. The moment she saw the letterhead, her blood ran cold. Classified. U.S. Department of Defense, Project Blackfire. She read further. And then, she stopped breathing. This can't be real, Marcus whispered, leaning over her shoulder. The document detailed a covert operation dating back nearly 2 decades. It exposed high-ranking government officials, military leaders, and intelligence officers, all connected through one classified directive. A directive to manipulate the justice system, to control convictions, to decide who walked free and who disappeared forever. And at the center of it all, Senator William Hawthorne and FBI Director Thomas Carter. Naomi slowly looked up. You were running this operation? Carter shook his head. I was trying to end it. Naomi frowned. You're on the damn list. Carter let out a bitter laugh. Because I put myself there. The room fell silent. Carter leaned forward, his hands braced against the table. I've been working to expose this for years, he admitted. I got close. Too close. So they buried me in it. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. So you're saying you're the good guy? She asked skeptically. Carter looked at her, his gaze tired but sharp. I'm saying I'm not your enemy. Naomi's mind raced. If Carter was telling the truth, if Hawthorne and his people framed him to protect their secrets, then the real enemy wasn't just the corrupt judges and cops. It was the entire system propping them up. And someone even bigger was pulling the strings. How far does this go? She asked. Carter sighed. Higher than you're ready for. Naomi's stomach tightened. Then get me ready. Before Carter could respond, Marcus's laptop pinged. An incoming call. Marcus glanced at the screen, then went pale. Naomi, he muttered. You're gonna want to see this. Naomi turned toward the screen. The caller ID was blocked. But the location? The White House. The room went dead silent. Vanessa let out a slow whistle. That can't be good. Naomi hesitated. Then, she answered. A mechanically distorted voice came through the speaker. Agent Cole. Naomi's spine stiffened. Who is this? The voice ignored the question. You should have stopped it, Sinclair. Naomi's jaw clenched. And yet, here I am. The voice chuckled. Then you should know what happens next. Naomi felt a cold chill crawl down her back. Tell me. There was a pause. Then, the sound of an explosion. Not in the call. Outside, the entire safe house shook violently as a massive fireball erupted from the street below. Marcus flinched back. Vanessa spun toward the window. And Naomi? She saw exactly what they were dealing with. Because in the wreckage of the explosion, barely visible through the smoke, was a black SUV. The same FBI vehicle that had been carrying Sinclair to federal custody. Naomi's heart stopped. No. The distorted voice spoke again. Sinclair is dead. Naomi gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. You did this. The voice remained eerily calm. No, Agent Cole. You did this. You set this in motion. Naomi's blood boiled. Who are you? The voice paused. Then, it spoke one final time. I am the law. The call disconnected. The room was dead silent. Marcus swallowed hard. I think we just pissed off the wrong people. Vanessa holstered her gun. No. She turned to Naomi. I think we just found the real enemy. Naomi took a deep breath. The battle against Whitaker, Sinclair, and the corrupt courts? That was just the surface. Now, they were up against something far, far bigger. And this time, it was personal. The flames from the explosion still burned in the street below, casting an orange glow against the windows of the safe house. Naomi Cole stood frozen, her mind racing. Sinclair was dead. Their only direct link to the conspiracy had just been eliminated. And the voice on the phone? It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. I am the law. Whoever they were, they had power, the kind that could erase anyone, anywhere, at any time. Vanessa King broke the silence first. We need to move. Now. Marcus Boyd was already packing up his laptop, his hands shaking slightly. Agreed. That bomb wasn't just to kill Sinclair. It was a message. Naomi finally spoke, her voice sharp, steady. Then let's send one back. Nowhere is safe. Within minutes, they were on the move, switching to an unmarked black sedan parked in a safe zone. Vanessa drove, weaving through back streets and alleyways, avoiding traffic cameras and satellite tracking. Marcus, in the back seat, worked furiously on his laptop. I'm scanning government networks, trying to find where that call originated from, he muttered. Naomi sat beside him, eyes locked on her phone, scrolling through news reports. Sinclair's death had already been classified as a tragic accident. The official story? Malfunction in the vehicle's fuel line. Naomi gritted her teeth. They've already buried the truth. Vanessa scoffed. Did you expect anything less? Naomi didn't answer. Because right now, she needed to figure out what came next. The last lead. Marcus suddenly froze. Holy guys, I found something. Naomi and Vanessa turned toward him. Remember the flash drive we got from the informant? He continued. Naomi nodded. Yeah, it had the list of names. Marcus clicked rapidly, pulling up a file buried deep inside the drive. Well, someone tried to erase part of it. But I just recovered the missing data. The screen changed, revealing a name they had never seen before. A name that wasn't supposed to exist. Jonathan Drake. The room went silent. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Who the hell is Jonathan Drake? Naomi didn't blink. Let's find out. The ghost in the system. Within minutes, Marcus was digging, typing faster than ever, pulling files from restricted databases, bypassing security firewalls. There's almost nothing on him, he muttered. No birth records, no social security number, nothing. So he's a ghost, Vanessa said. Marcus shook his head. No, he's worse than a ghost. He's a goddamn myth. Then he found something. A single classified file. Naomi leaned in. The document was heavily redacted, but one phrase stood out. Jonathan Drake, covert strategist, U.S. government black operations. Naomi's stomach dropped. He's not a criminal, she whispered. He's the one controlling them. Marcus exhaled. If he's real, he's been running things from the shadows for decades. Vanessa scoffed. And let me guess, no photos, no location, nothing useful? Marcus hesitated. Then he smirked. Actually, I have an address. Naomi's head snapped toward him. Where? Marcus turned the screen. A private estate, buried deep in Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. Vanessa grinned. Road trip. Naomi smiled for the first time that night. Let's pay Jonathan Drake a visit. The setup. The drive was 4 hours long, winding through forests, back roads, and private land. As they neared the estate, Naomi studied the layout. High walls, thermal cameras, armed guards. It was a fortress. Vanessa whistled. Well, at least we know we have the right place. Naomi nodded. We go in quiet. No mistakes. Marcus hesitated. You sure about this? Naomi looked at him. If Drake is the one pulling the strings, we don't have a choice. Marcus sighed. All right, but if we die, I just want it on record that I told you this was a bad idea. Naomi smirked. Duly noted. Infiltration. They slipped through the perimeter, avoiding motion detectors and infrared beams. Moving silently, sticking to the shadows. Naomi led the way, her heartbeat steady. Finally, they reached the main house. A massive, stone mansion, completely isolated. No guards inside. Which meant Drake was expecting them. Naomi turned to Vanessa and Marcus. Stay sharp. They entered. The house was silent. Then, a voice echoed through the darkness. I was wondering when you'd get here. Lights flooded the room. And at the far end of the hall, standing behind a polished oak desk, was Jonathan Drake, a tall man in his 60s, dressed in a perfectly pressed suit, his hair silver but sharp. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't surprised. He was smiling. Naomi Cole, he said smoothly. You've been making quite a mess. Naomi's hand hovered over her gun. And you've been covering one up. Drake chuckled. The difference between us? I don't need to cover anything up. His gaze darkened. Because I own the system. Naomi's blood went cold. This wasn't just another corrupt official. Jonathan Drake was the system. And now? She was standing in his house. The air inside the mansion was thick with tension. Naomi Cole stood motionless, her hand hovering near her gun, her eyes locked on Jonathan Drake, the man who had orchestrated everything from the shadows. Drake was calm, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his silver hair neatly combed back. He didn't flinch, didn't show the slightest fear. He simply smirked, as if he had already won. You've been busy, Agent Cole, he said smoothly, pouring himself a glass of bourbon. Naomi's jaw clenched. You killed Sinclair. Drake chuckled. I cleaned up a mess. Sinclair got sloppy. He should have known better. Naomi took a slow step forward, her pulse steady. And how many others have you cleaned up? Drake swirled the bourbon in his glass. More than you'd like to know. Vanessa King, standing just behind Naomi, gripped her gun tighter. So you admit it? She asked coldly. Drake smiled, taking a sip of his drink. What difference does it make? You already knew. Marcus Boyd stared at him, disbelief written all over his face. You're not even trying to deny it. Drake shrugged. Why would I? He gestured to the grand room around them. You think I got here by playing fair? Naomi's stomach twisted. Because she knew he was right. This wasn't just a corrupt official covering his tracks. This was a man who had spent decades building a system so untouchable that he didn't even need to hide anymore. He didn't fear exposure, because he controlled the entire machine. Drake sighed, setting down his glass. Let's skip the part where you threaten me and I pretend to be scared, he said, walking toward them. Vanessa tensed, her finger tightening on the trigger. Drake stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked on Naomi's. You're smart, he said. Smarter than Sinclair. Smarter than Hawthorne. And definitely smarter than that idiot Whitaker. He smiled slightly. So I'll make you an offer. Naomi raised an eyebrow. I don't make deals with criminals. Drake chuckled. Criminals? Is that what you think I am? He shook his head. I'm not the villain here, Agent Cole. I keep the country running. Naomi's fists clenched. By manipulating the law. By deciding who gets justice and who doesn't. Drake smirked. Justice is an illusion. Power is real. He studied her carefully. And right now, I'm offering you power. Naomi felt Vanessa stiffen beside her. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Vanessa snapped. Drake ignored her. His focus was solely on Naomi. Work for me, he said. Naomi's pulse pounded. Excuse me. Drake smiled knowingly. I've been watching you, Agent Cole. You don't just want to put away bad guys. You want to change the system. He took another step forward. The problem is, you can't change a system from the outside. Naomi's stomach twisted. Because a small part of her, a tiny, dangerous part, knew he wasn't lying. For years, she had fought corruption, chased criminals, exposed lies. And yet, they always came back. The system never truly changed. Drake could see the doubt flicker across her face. He smirked. Think about it, Cole. You could spend the rest of your life chasing ghosts, arresting men like Sinclair and Hawthorne, just for new ones to replace them. He tilted his head. Or you could actually do something about it. Drake didn't flinch, didn't blink. So that's your answer? He asked. Naomi's grip tightened. No. Drake raised an eyebrow. No, you won't work for me. Naomi smirked. No, I don't need to change the system from the inside. She pulled out her phone, turned the screen toward him. Drake's eyes narrowed. And then he saw it. The live news broadcast. A breaking story flashing across the bottom of the screen. Jonathan Drake exposed. Secret files leak government conspiracy to public. His face paled. Naomi tilted her head. You thought I came here to negotiate? She said. Drake's breathing slowed. What did you do? He whispered. Naomi smiled coldly. I didn't come here to take your offer, Drake. She stepped closer. I came here to take you down. Drake's eyes darted to Marcus. Marcus grinned, holding up his laptop. Hacked your entire network while we were driving, he said cheerfully. You really need better firewalls. Drake's jaw clenched. The walls were closing in. For the first time, he looked afraid. Naomi leaned in, whispering the final words he would ever hear as a free man. Checkmate. At that exact moment, the doors burst open. FBI agents stormed the room, guns drawn, shouting orders. Drake slowly raised his hands. He had no escape, no power, no control. It was over. The end of an era. As Drake was dragged out of his mansion, Naomi stepped into the cold night air, inhaling deeply. Vanessa chuckled beside her. You really like making powerful men cry, don't you? Naomi smirked. It's a gift. Marcus stretched. So, what now? Naomi looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long time. She didn't know the answer. The war wasn't over. The system was still broken. But tonight, she had won. And that was enough. For now, the night was crisp and cool, the air still heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Naomi Cole stood outside Jonathan Drake's estate, watching as FBI agents loaded the most powerful man in the country into the back of an armored vehicle. Drake, the ghost, the myth, the man behind the system, was finally in handcuffs. But even now, even as flashbulbs from the press illuminated his downfall, he didn't struggle, didn't fight, didn't panic. He simply smiled. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Because she knew this wasn't over. Not really. Not yet. The final warning. As the FBI convoy prepared to roll out, Naomi walked toward Drake's transport vehicle, stepping up to the door just before the agents closed it. Drake looked up at her, his eyes sharp and calculating. You think you've won? He asked, his voice almost amused. Naomi folded her arms. I don't think, Drake. I know. Drake chuckled, shaking his head. You really don't understand, do you? He said. Then explain it to me, Naomi challenged. Drake leaned forward, his smile never fading. You didn't destroy the system, he murmured. You just removed a piece of it. Naomi's jaw tightened. Good, she said. I'll remove the next one too. Drake's smile widened. And that's where you're wrong. He tilted his head. Because the system isn't made of men like me. It's made of ideas. Naomi stayed silent. Drake leaned back, relaxing against the seat. You think the people want justice? He mused. They don't. They want order. And when the dust settles, when the next crisis arrives, they'll forget all about me. And someone else will take my place. He smirked. The machine keeps running, Agent Cole. No matter how many parts you remove. The agents shut the door, locking him inside. The convoy drove off, disappearing into the night. And Naomi? She was left standing there, her chest tight, her mind racing. Because no matter how much she hated it, Drake wasn't entirely wrong. The battle was over. But the war was far from won. Loose ends. Back at the FBI headquarters, the tension had finally lifted. The news was everywhere. Jonathan Drake, the secret power behind Washington's elite, arrested in a shocking sting operation. FBI agent Naomi Cole exposes deep state corruption, sending shockwaves through the country. The fall of a king, but who will rise next? Vanessa King leaned back in her chair, flipping through the headlines. You're famous now, she smirked. Naomi rolled her eyes. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Marcus Boyd, still hunched over his laptop, let out a low whistle. The FBI just froze over $2 billion in offshore accounts connected to Drake's network, he said. That's gotta hurt. Naomi nodded. It's a start. But she knew. Money could be replaced. Power could be rebuilt. The real question was, who would rise to take Drake's place? Carter walked in, a folder in hand, his expression unreadable. You did it, Cole, he said. Naomi looked at him carefully. Carter had been on the list. She still didn't fully trust him. But for now, she would play along. No, she said. We just took out one problem. There are 100 more waiting. Carter gave a small, knowing smile. That's what I like about you, he said. You never stop. Naomi didn't smile back. Because she couldn't. Not yet. The choice. Later that night, Naomi sat alone in her apartment, staring at a sealed envelope on the table. Inside, an official offer from the White House. An invitation to join a classified task force. A chance to reshape the system from within. She exhaled, gripping the edge of the envelope. Drake had offered her power. Now, the government was offering her the same thing. The only difference? This time, she would be in control. But did she really want that? Would she become just another piece of the machine? Or could she actually change something? Naomi stared at the envelope for a long, long time. Then, she picked it up and ripped it in half. She wasn't here to join the system. She was here to burn it down. One last call. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Naomi hesitated. Then, she answered. A familiar voice spoke. You made the right choice, Agent Cole. Naomi's blood ran cold. Who is this? She demanded. The voice chuckled. Let's just say, I'm on your side. For now. Naomi's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? A pause. Then, to warn you. Naomi's stomach twisted. Warn me about what? Another pause. Then, the voice said 3 words that made her heart stop. Drake wasn't alone. Naomi's breath hitched. The call disconnected. She stared at her phone. And she knew. It wasn't over. Not even close.